and I've been blogging for a couple years, and I'm so excited to be here with George. He is the music composer for the game Jade Alliance 3, and he's going to be talking to us about the game today. So I'll let George go ahead and introduce himself.
Okay. Hello, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really thrilled to be here. So my name is George Strezov. I'm from Sofia, Bulgaria, and I'm the composer for Jagged Alliance 3, which is a game which actually the second one came in 1999 when I was like 10 years old. So I've played a bunch of it when I was like young and I was playing games in school. And I actually never thought that one day I'm going to be writing music for it. Basically, I'm a film and TV and video games composer, and basically film music has been my biggest passion. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's it.
That's awesome. Well, first part I wanted to ask was what it was the full creative process for the Jade Alliance? Like, what was your full, like, from start to beginning? Like, what was your
Mm.
full thoughts on the game? Like, you just mentioned how you had it from when you were younger. Like, did you want to, like, bring in some of those sounds and stuff, like, or create your own? Like, how was your full process of creating for Jade Alliance 3?
Okay, so first of all, this is a game that was developed by Hemimon Games. That's a Bulgarian studio that I worked together with on a couple of other games like Surviving Mars, for example, or Stranded Alien Dawn or Victor Run. And so since we have this relationship, they invited me very early on during the process. So I was able to, experiment and do some tests and, write music. We actually decided to reject some of the music that I've written on what I'm about to say, the stylistic aspects of the soundtrack. So the difference between film music and video game music is I think that film music and films in general, they have something that's real and that's visible. Um, Obviously, with the exception of animation. But if you have like a feature film, even though if they're like green screen and CGI, there's something real that's out there that you can see. With games, it's not like this. So games, you have to create your whole like world sonically and also visibly. Um, so when we started out, I spoke a lot with Boyan Ivanov, who's the game designer of Jagged Alliance, and we talked very much obviously about what happened in this like Jagged Alliance 2. So there were a couple of key elements. So one of them was being the marimba. So this is like a pitched percussion instrument made of wood, pretty cool sounding. So we decided to keep that. We also decided that it would be a great fit since Jagged Alliance is based in a like made up country in Africa. So that kind of gave those vibes. And the second thing was we wanted to keep those like references to action movies of the 90s and early 2000s. And basically he have this sonic aesthetic. Now later on, because I said that we scrapped some of the music that I initially wrote, um, is that we started working in a more contemporary and hybrid aesthetic, meaning that we had some uh, orchestra, but most of it was synthesizers and ethnic instruments. The reason for that was obviously budgeting reasons, because there wasn't a possibility at that time to record like the whole orchestra together. And I have to point out that Jagged Alliance was recorded in three different countries. So it was recorded in Bulgaria, it was recorded in the Czech Republic, and also in South Africa. That
Awesome.
was like the final touch of it. But before that even happened, we went into that synthesizer um, slash hybrid orchestra path. But when we played the game, it didn't feel like Jagged Alliance because the game already has some sort of an established um, tone let's say.
Mm,
And we wanted to keep that and and also a lot of people were huge fans of Jagged Alliance 2
mhm,
and they played the game. They continue to play it right now. There are also mods
mm,
featuring some parts of the original games in Jagged Alliance 3. So that was a cool thing. And at that point, the like publisher of the game, THQ Nordic, they really fought. One of the producers that there, Brad Loxton, he really fought to get the orchestra recorded, and that's a uh, I would say sadly it's a luxury nowadays to have everything being performed live. But if you look at films um Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, all those classic scores of the 90s, the key element is that they were performed together at the studio. So there's a lot of musicians, and we made our goal so that we record everything. We also focus very much on performance.
mm,
So now if I'm to respond to the question about the process, since I was very early on, I would be able to look at concept art, talk with the designers, go at the studio, play the game. I also had the game on my Steam account, which I was also being able to play at home, for example. And the only issue was that there was at first there was like very limited gameplay. So there was a lot of stuff that I had to imagine.
mm,
But generally, when we started out, we knew that we had a specific style in mind. We knew that the game is a tactical, turn-based, like role-playing game strategy. Uh, so we knew that we needed different types of music. We needed battle music, we needed exploration music, and um we had like savannah music and jungle music. So right now in the soundtrack they have different names, but initially they were like battle track 1, battle track 2, and
mm,
so forth.
mm. It's awesome. Pretty cool. And
Yeah.
then with you talking about your creative process, also I want to ask, was there like specific themes you wanted for specific characters? So like when people are like playing, they would immediately know, oh my gosh, like this character is gonna come,
Mm.
or like, certain scenes, or maybe even like really help basically to me because I think sound really does help with like characters being connected. They're like, oh, I want that sound so much, like it helps them play better and stuff. Like when they were like playing that character, was that like in mind when you were like creating like for each per character like themes and stuff for them?
Well, in this regard, no. This is in musical theory language that's called the leitmotif. And
Hmm.
the biggest user of leitmotifs was like Wagner. So he had like leitmotifs for specific characters. With Jagged Alliance, we have one main theme, and there were no special themes for any of the characters. However, there was something that happened later on that was real close to the maybe, I don't know, like 7 or 8 months before the release of the game. So it was very close to the release. And I was playing the game, and there was one mission where I would liberate like a village,
Hmm.
and the characters there will be so happy that you killed all the bad guys on that level.
Yeah.
And then some music just started, like the exploration music or the savannah music or something, but
Yeah.
it wasn't very connected with what's happening on screen. So at that time I took some sort of a gamble, which I think paid off. I would say that at first kind of everybody that was connected to the game, including myself, we were kind of like, maybe that's not a very good idea. That might be a bit pushy, a bit too much. But we decided to do it. So I went to now a friend of mine who lives in Johannesburg, and they recorded the African chants, which I later that they're like folklore songs, which I later on arranged for orchestra in the style of the game. And then when you liberate that village, the one of the African songs comes in. It's not a specific theme per se, so it's not like a musical thematic material, but it's some sort of an interactiveness between what's happening and kind of like the sound of the real world, as if the NPCs of the village are not only joyful visually, but they also sing one of those songs, and everybody loved it afterwards. So it was real strange, but this is also a testament, at least for me, how important it is to for a composer to be involved in the
Mm.
whole process, not just to write, because I can just write like minutes of music and up to a specific brief,
Yeah.
but doing something like this really elevates the gameplay, the experience, um, the whole process of making a game.
Mm. Okay, cool. And then my next question would be, was there a specific, maybe a level, scene, or like, what was your favorite part of the whole like game for Jade Alliance that was like maybe like a really stood out to you? Or like, this is my favorite. I really just love what I created, like that part.
All right. I can like specifically, I very much enjoyed working on the battle tracks,
Okay.
but there was one problem. I can tell you all about now that some
Yeah.
time has come, and this was something that was really hard for us to pinpoint at
Hmm.
that time. And since the game it's a tactical
Hmm.
turn-based combat,
Hmm.
so it's a lot of like playing chess.
Hmm.
And so obviously composer, you get the orchestra, somebody says, okay, you can record this with an orchestra. So I go, oh, in. I recorded, the music of my lifetime. And there's some real cool tracks out there, but they're so big and so majestic. And then we play the game, and then you meet like two mercenaries in the jungle, and you start this fight, and you have like seven of your guys, and you
Yeah.
fight like two just
Yeah.
like low level, and then the music is blasting. And at first, it just felt weird playing the game,
Mm-hmm.
but then we decided that we're going to make the combat music into we call them like this is our internal talk and and terminology, like internal development terminology. We had like cerebral battle tracks, which are more toned down, and boss battle tracks. So I really like one of those tracks. It's called on the album. It's called Payday, and it's real simple. It was made for a battle track
Mm-hmm.
that was initially in a more urban territory.
Hmm.
Um, However, now it gets triggered on different occasions in the game. It's not just then at that time. But at first, that was like what I had in mind. So it has a lot of like djembes and some guitars, and it's follows this like really simple ostinato, like dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun 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 dun. So it's the really driving and pumping track. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I did get to
Mm.
listen to the full soundtrack myself through Spotify, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And then another question I had about tactical games is there like a theme or like would you call it a like a trend that you see in the video game world for tactical games like in the music department that you kind of see as like a trend, if that makes sense, for tactical video games?
Hmm. I wouldn't say for tactical. Can I expand the question into like generally like music
Of
for
course,
games?
yeah.
Yeah, so one of the biggest, push in video game music industry has been the interactiveness.
Hmm.
So recently, more and more we get adaptive music,
Hmm.
which is basically music can be adaptive. That this is very simple terms, but it can be adaptive two ways. One is like horizontal, so you get like A section, B section, A section with more instruments, for example, and then C section, for example. So uh, it like A section goes on a loop,
Yeah.
and then something triggers a transition that goes to a B section.
Oh.
That's like the horizontal, and then you have vertical, which is um, you enter a cave, and then you have like the ambient music
Mhm.
as a layer. So imagine vertically you have multiple layers,
Mhm.
um, tension layers, let's say.
Mhm.
And so you go into the cave, so it's very ambient and drony and like mysterious. And then something comes in, or there's like enemies lurking nearby, and then you get like a layer of suspense and danger coming in here and there, up
Mhm.
to a point where you get into a battle, for example, and then it adds elements like percussion, so it makes it more battle oriented. This is very, simple terms, but this is a trend that has now become more of a like necessity
Yeah.
in video games. Most of the music of all of the music in video games when I was playing as a kid was linear. So you have a starting point, you have an ending point, and the music just fades in and then fades out.
Mhm.
It can be triggered on a specific event or like a cinematic or something like this, but generally it's like one piece of music that's stays the same throughout, I don't know, the history of music. Whilst when you have adaptive music, it's always different depending on the gamer and their immersive experience. So it makes it more immersive for the players. So I think this is a trend that has now become in a way a standard in video games, and it really makes it so much interesting, much more interesting for the players to be like involved in the process. In a way, I kind of make this connection to film music where you would have the Dolby Atmos, for example, on a film, and you'll be, basically everything goes on around you, so you're watching a screen, but the sound and everything kind of adapts to where you're sitting in the room. So kind of like this makes it more involved, like the player, the gamer is more involved in the process.
Mhm. Okay. I'll say I can see that, yeah. And then next question I had was there any specific influences or composers that influenced your work specifically for the Jagged Alliance 3?
Hmm. Good question. I think that we're like all of us composers are always like influenced by things that we hear.
Mhm.
It can be things on the radio,
Mhm.
you know. Um, in the specific case of Jagged Alliance, uh, maybe I had a couple of soundtracks that I listened to very much to get an idea from, and like sonically. One was Die Hard, Michael Kamen. Fantastic, wonderful soundtrack. Um, and the other thing was there's this kind of obscure film called The Constant Gardener. It's a like political thriller with Ray Fine,
Mhm.
and the soundtrack was done by, I believe, yeah, it was Alberto Iglesias, and it had this uh, very opposed to the action that was going on. So the music was in contrast was very tense and kind of sad in some ways, but very distant, not very emotional, but like detached from the emotional side of what was going on screen. And that I think that made some sort of a very nice impact. And the game is also sorry, not the game, the movie Constant Gardener, it was also based in Africa, and that, contrast of string like classical music with the visuals kind of made a huge impression on me. So I was in ways that there is one track called Senzenina that's again a song from the African singers. So I decided to go into that kind of direction stylistically. So it's only strings and the voice, and I think it's very moving in a way. But other influences, I would say maybe the Bourne soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the Bourne soundtrack and John Powell in general.
Mhm.
Um, I had a chance to work with John a couple of years back on Solo, the Star Wars, the Star Wars story, and yeah, he's a great guy, amazing composer. And the funny thing is that also sometimes I read online some comments that oh, the music reminds me of this and this, and some of those films I haven't watched. There was like this Russian TV series or something like this, and somebody said, "Okay, this is very similar to this," and I'm like, "Oh, that's strange. I've never heard of this in my life." So,
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
All right, and then are there any future like projects or video games that you're working on that maybe you can kind of tease for the end of the interview? Kind of wanted
Mm.
to ask. I don't know how much you're allowed to say.
Yeah, well, for video games, currently I don't have any projects going on currently. I just finished like a local thing, a film that was pretty big in Bulgaria. It was actually kind of a surreal experience. Um, I had this right before the World Soundtrack Awards, so it was honestly it was real hard to kind of wrap my head around it because the film is period drama feature film. It's like 2 hours, 47 minutes. It's pretty long. And it's a real nice movie about a Bulgarian football player who was really popular, but he died at the age of 28. So in a car accident. So but he was beloved by everybody basically, and still to this day there like a stadium on with his name, and all like the fans of this specific football team uh, are still huge fans. So the surreal experience was like the premiere of this was in an arena,
Yeah.
and there were like 8,500 people for the premiere attending, and I think maybe 7,000 of those people were like football fans.
Wow.
So they were constantly chanting, and at the beginning they were like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh, I really hope they like the movie because
Yeah.
if they don't like the movie, yeah, we're
Yeah.
screwed." Yeah.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So currently it's my kind of time off. I have some films that I'm going to do next year, again local stuff, and a recording next week, but. Maybe for the first time in ages, I'll have my Christmas time off. We'll see, you know.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
fingers crossed. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And then last question was, what advice would you give to inspiring composers and people who want to work in like video game or film, television? Like, what advice would you give them?
All right. I have an answer for this because I've been thinking a lot about this topic, and I can give two advices straight on the top of my head. So the first one is be prepared. They're kind of connected. So the first one is be prepared to work in a collaborative environment. That is very important.
Mm,
So it's the same with films,
mm,
it's the same with games, maybe different creatives that you're working with, but it's very important that you work together with those people because
yeah,
uh, at the end of the day, everybody wants that project to be great.
exactly.
Um, and your job as a composer is to make sure that the music elevates that project. And I'll give it's not for games, but for films, I would say that the composer usually gets at the end of the process. So that film that I spoke about, the football player, I did basically last year at that time, like October last year, and I was a replacement composer. So I had very less time to do it. But the director, who's a dear friend of mine, and the director of that project worked on the film for 3.5 years.
Oh,
So 3.5 years doing pre-production. Then he did all the shooting, which was like a month or something like this. And then they had the editing. So he was constantly in that scenario for 3.5 years before they got to music. So my job is to understand their needs, to understand that their problems, and not try to push, my ego as a composer and say, hey, you want what I want to write music like John Williams, or I want to write my next symphony for this film. No, I have to write something that, for example, because there are a lot of football matches,
Yeah.
um, football games, sorry. And so they would need, in order for the tension to be real dramatic, so that's the action kind of in the game. So they'll need music that would push, that wouldn't necessarily need, for example, a melody or something like this, but it would need the drive and the energy to make the uh, what's going on the screen look bigger than it is. With Jagged Alliance, I was happy to be working with the people at Hangimon Games for 3 years and a half. So we had a lot of time to discuss different ideas, and but if I wasn't doing that, for example, the African tracks in the soundtrack wouldn't exist because I would never come come up with that idea if I wasn't speaking to the people involved. And my second suggestion is that's a very important one, and I wish somebody told me this when I started up. So I've been working in this industry for about 20 years. So currently I'm 35-year-old guy from Sofia, Bulgaria, and I started at 15. I started earning money from this at 15, doing like short films and advertisement and documentaries, some obscure TV shows that needed someone to score. And one thing that, nobody told me about was how to handle rejection. And for me, that's very important because when you work into doing into this industry, you always get rejected. You know, uh, like uh, even to some extremes where you get people like Danny Elfman or Gabriel Yaret have their like scores completely thrown out. Gabriel Yaret, there is a I'm a huge soundtrack nerd. Sorry about it. He did The English Patient. Fantastic soundtrack, fantastic movie. And then he did Troy. And for Troy, there is a rejected soundtrack release online. You should check it out. It's amazing. It's so interesting. And during the some of those test screenings, somebody said that the music is not working well with the picture. And I think I've read somewhere that it wasn't the final version, so it was not mixed and mastered, and they completely rejected the score. It was recorded with full orchestra, choir, ethnic singers, ethnic instruments, and they hired James Horner to do the soundtrack, and he did it, I think, for like 2 weeks or something like that. Michael Giacchino, he did Star Wars Rogue One instead of Alexander Desplat. So he had very little time to do it. And I suppose that, yeah, Johan Johansson, um, um, rest his soul, he was rejected for Dune. No, sorry, not for Dune, possibly for Dune as well, but for Blade Runner. So that's stuff that constantly happens from on larger scales like this one, completely firing you from a project, to small stuff like, oh, this doesn't work, oh, maybe that's not right. For the football film, I did something that I consider to be one of my greatest 8 bars of music, orchestrated with a full orchestra. They played it beautifully. There was a solo violin on top of it, and so that there was like the train was going, and the main characters got separated, so they kiss, and then there's like the slow motion. The train goes, and she's real sad, and she's looking at the camera, and there's my music, like my magnum opus. Uh, and then at one of the screenings, somebody said, you know what? With this music, I feel like this train is going to Hogwarts. So we should change it.
Yeah.
Um, so stuff like this happens every time. And I wish that somebody told me that what they're rejecting is the music.
Mm,
They're not rejecting you as a creative person. They're not telling me, you know what, George, you're not a good composer.
mm,
They're telling, no, the music you've written doesn't work for that scene. It can work for something else,
mm.
but for that scene or for that game, for that video game,
Yeah.
it doesn't connect.
Mm,
And this is very important because especially at the beginning, I was always so depressed when somebody would say, "Oh no, that's not what we want," and I was like, "Oh, bummer. I wish I was a better composer than this," and so forth and so forth. And it can be really, really, really stressful, I think. So these are the two advices that I would give people. Oh, and just thought of a third one, and that's just listen to a lot of music.
mm,
Keep your love for
mm.
listening to music. I'm a huge audiophile, so I constantly listen to different styles of music, different genres, and yeah, the more it's like a vocabulary. So the more you listen to, the joyful it will be for you to write music. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I had a wonderful time getting to learn more about Jade Alliance and the music industry because there was some things you were sharing. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. So cool. And I
Yeah,
definitely want to check
thank
out
you.
this movie. If you go ahead and share the full names with me, I would love to actually check it out and definitely watch it. Actually, it sounds really cool. Actually. Um,
Yeah, we'll do. Yeah. Once it's out, because it's still
oh, it's still in
hearing
post
the
production.
film. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
yeah. Mm.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all my followers watching. And this is George, and I want to make sure I pronounce your last name right. George Strezos.
Strezov, yes,
Strezos.
Strezov,
Perfect.
yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
correct.
Well, thank you guys, and I
Yeah.
hope you guys keep following and watching me online. Bye.
Yes. Thank you. Bye bye.